This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. This is the January 9th, 2018 edition. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatel, back with you for this show 299, a significant show in many ways, not the least of which is, if everything goes according to my plan, that will be the last time you hear the old DRF Players Podcast theme song, because we, and by we I mean me, JK, producer Craig, producer AJ, working together for something special that, if all goes according to plan, will debut on Friday with show 300. So that may be the last time you hear the dulcet tones of Todd Unger on the DRF Players Podcast. We'll talk about Todd and the origins of the show a little bit more next week, but we got so much to talk about now. First thing I'm going to do is bring in my co-host. You know him, you love him. He lives on the planet Texas. He's the people's champ, Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up?
What's going on? Looking forward to the potential of the new intro. Although we will miss Todd if and when we have to do that. I know that the first time I ever met Todd Unger, he's like this really kind of, tall, well-dressed looking, good-looking guy. You'd think that he like works at some like fashion magazine or something. And I was like, what the hell is he doing here? And how does he have to do? Is he involved in racing? He like didn't fit. He was so well-dressed in racing. No offense, to our racing community. But the first time that was the first impression I had of Todd is, why is he here and why is he so well-dressed?
That's pretty funny. He has since moved on to greener pastures, but his voice has graced us since. But it may be time for something a little bit new, something a little bit different. We had a lot of folks comment on our missed show on Friday. I found it a bit ironic that a lot of the people who complained about missing the show on Friday, oh, now I got to make this drive, I can't listen. At least three of them were people I talked to on at least a weekly/monthly basis. And I just told them all the same thing. Next time, just call me. I'll keep you company for the drive. I could throw in a hello and welcome. I could talk about the Sultan of Schenectady. I could tell you about one of the top 10 pro punters in the UK today. You don't have to just listen to the show. You can always give me. Maybe I was feeling lonely sitting there convalescing from my flu at the hour you wanted to listen to the show. Be creative, people. Did you get any feedback?
Yeah, our friend Eric Bialik, by the way, we've never had this conversation. So production meeting inside of the show. Eric is always he always texts me. He's like, why does Pete always say Rob Dove, top 10 pro punter in the UK? And I said, well, I think I defended you. I said, I think he says it because he says this man's name that people might not know. And if you've just tuned in for the first time, there needs to be some context there of who this person is and why he's being mentioned.
I do think that's a good answer. That's a good answer. Rob, great friend, listener of the show. He is one of the top 10 pro punters in the UK today. It's factually correct. That's one reason I say it. Another, I think it's a running joke that goes back to a message board from the 2000s when I first met a lot of English pro punter types, including the Giant, whom I've talked about on this show in episodes past. And I don't know how, I can't remember how it came up, but it was just a phrase that I heard and I liked. It provided that valuable context. And thus, Rob Dove, one of the top 10 pro punters in the UK today. Where should we begin today? There's so much. Let's start with some congratulations, JK. While the DRF Players Podcast did not win, neither did it win an Eclipse Award, nor did it garner an honorable mention. We do have one Eclipse winner on the team.
We do. Yeah. And I know that when we we joked that I text Craig, I said, listen, Craig, if you get DQ'd for some weird reason, hopefully we're in second and then you get put up anyways. It's like having two horses in an inquiry. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, hopefully you'll win either way.
Baffert in the low South futurity. Now, You said that joke quite possibly, JK, before realizing that there was this tempest in a teapot. Craig won as part of a wonderful multimedia presentation about Man of War that the great Barbara Livingston, the Meryl Streep of the Eclipse Awards. Barbara Livingston winning her fifth one that was just announced in 2018 for work in 2017. There was a little tempest in a teapot on Twitter, people with way too much time on their hands, suggesting that there was some sort of issue because some of the material in the multimedia piece was like previously published. I read the rules. There was no prohibition of any such thing. And what it came down to me was like somebody saying, oh, that movie can't win an Oscar for 2017 because it was based on a book that came out in 2012. When there's older material that gets repurposed and shaped and then re-released in a new context, that's a new thing. That multimedia piece was published, released, whatever you want to say, in 2017, no problem. A deserving winner, and very cool. I know you had a chance to check it out.
I did. No, it was great. It was it was one of those deals where when you watch it, at least for me, the rest of the world kind of stops for a second, and you're really like enthralled by what it is that's presenting to you. It's this story about Man of War and his kind of humble beginnings and where he came from and what was left behind, And I just thought it was really good. It was well done, and I was really proud of. I don't know Barbara personally. We obviously all admire her work. She's without a doubt one of, if not the best horse racing and thoroughbred photographers in the world. And so we always admire her work, but I was very proud of our friend and producer Craig on the work that he does. And as someone who's new to racing, I'm really, really inspired by his enthusiasm about the game. And he's not here, so we can talk about him a little bit more. But
hopefully he won't listen. AJ, tell him not to listen. I don't want him to hear saying nice things about him. We'll get a big head.
But it's exciting for me. You and I both get a text from Craig usually on Tuesday morning saying, hey guys, we'll call in a little bit. We get a text on Friday mornings, hey guys, we'll call in a little bit. And then sometimes on Thursdays for out of the gate. But I've gotten texts from Craig now on Saturdays and Sundays talking about racing, and that's pretty exciting and pretty cool.
Yeah, he's definitely getting into it, which is cool. One other just quick point I wanted to address, person whose opinion I respect tremendously, put out a call on Twitter, why hadn't DRF sort of stepped in and said more about, defending Barbara essentially. And to me, the reason and I did no inside info here, just my guess, when somebody makes an accusation like so ill-informed, you kind of only give it life by addressing it. And, they knew that the due process from the Eclipse Awards, from the NTRA was going to play out and that the award would stay where it rightfully belonged. And anyway, just because that's a person I respect a lot, wanted to throw that idea out there in the world. But that's enough on that. The rest of the Eclipse Award finalists are out. The ballot that we went over 1 week ago on this show, I think all but one of my selections ended up in the top three. Does that sound right to you, JK?
If the one you're thinking about is Head of Plains, correct?
That's the one, yeah. The one area that I didn't get. And I wanted to ask you about that. What are you hearing? What is the general feeling about the owner award? And I mean, I get it. I explained as we were talking about it why I think it's a little bit different when you've got an owner buying in unspecified percentages in different nom de courses and this and that. Like I get it. So I'm not like horrified that my selection wasn't in the top three, but I was just curious if you had any further info or if any of the folks you've talked to, you know a lot of insider types, what people are saying about this.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest. Here's the thing, and this was a conversation that I kind of, I don't own any horses. And so I talked to our friend and podcast listener and the smartest guy I think in racing is Marshall Graham, who runs 10 Strike Racing. And I was congratulating him when I looked at the list that you forwarded me that was sent out by the NTRA that was provided by either DRF or Equibase on the leaderboards for owners and like who won the most races and so on and so forth. And Marshall explained to me that he had 140 something wins, but he said in reality it was really like 156 because they only put your name there if you own the horse outright, what the full line says. So if the full line says Godolphin Racing, then that's one ownership entity. If the full line says Godolphin and so-and-so, which it was the worst example because Godolphin doesn't partner on horses, but then that would be a separate entity that would be listed on that leaderboard. And so here's what I think happened is that because Head of Plains and Sheep Pond typically don't own outright on their own, they have a lot of partners that their lines were lost because in the leaderboard that was sent out by the NTRA, no fault of theirs, Head of Plains wasn't even listed on there as on the graded stakes portion of the list of who'd won the most. And so I think that, to be honest with you, I really honestly believe that owner and breeder are one of those categories that a lot of voters have to revert to those charts to put the year in context. And Head of Plains wasn't listed, and I think it got lost in that shuffle.
Makes sense. That makes sense. And whether or not that's fair, I don't know. Is the point of the award to reward people who are more personally invested owning horses individually? And is that the kind of owners they want to continue to award? That's not a ridiculous opinion. But if they want to sort of take a look at the way different business models are developing, maybe that's another area to take a look at in this space, and something that could be clarified differently or different information presented. Because we see as voters, you see the information you get, and you'll see sometimes you'll see somebody, somebody smart will say, well, why is this person nominated? And then you look at the information you get from the NTRA, and it's very obvious based on those metrics that you get. This theoretically controversial selection was really very obvious. So, the NTRA wields a lot of power in sending out those voter information packets, and maybe they're very happy with it as it is, and that's cool. But if they want to consider this for the future, potentially there'd be some changes that could be made. But generally, I didn't have too many comments. I feel like we mostly covered everything last week. I think we'll have time for more Eclipse chatter as we get closer to the actual awards or in the wake of the awards. What do you think, Jonathan?
Yeah, absolutely. There'll be plenty of time leading up to it. The awards have been moved to the Thursday. They usually take place on a Saturday, and they've moved to the Thursday before the Pegasus for an interesting dynamic of having that going on Thursday. Then they have the typical paddock party on Friday, and then of course Saturday will be the Pegasus, which is starting to creep upon us, and there's been some news about that as well.
Yeah, I did want to talk about the Pegasus news. Absolutely. It was announced this week. I think it's official that Ron Paolucci, Luch Racing, is going to be leasing one of his stalls to a horse we've spent an awful lot of time talking about on this show, Sharp Azteca. Is that the news you were referring to?
Yeah, no, it was really cool, and like we talked about, and I commented when someone asked me on Twitter. I was lucky enough to run down to South Florida for a day or two this weekend, and a friend of ours, Blake Jesse, works with Ron, and so I was hanging out in their suite when the deal was actually happening.
Pretty cool.
And that was really cool. Jorge Navarro came in to kind of talk, and I think he was, he's got a relationship with Luch, obviously, because of they train horses. He trains horses for him, and so it was fun to watch Luch in action. He's a passionate man that really loves this sport and has the means to see some really interesting ideas through that some people might not be able to do. But he also has that gambler spirit that allows him to do some really cool stuff. So he called his shot. He told me before Jorge came up there, he said, I'm about to make the deal that's going to get Sharp Azteca in my gate. And I kind of looked at him funny. And then the next day it was released. So, I think it's great. I love the horse. I think the horse will be the second choice. I think the horse is probably the most interesting prospect for the race, other than the odds-on favorite that Gunrunner is. But I also think that from a race shape and race dynamics, he really makes the race more interesting and puts pressure on Gunrunner in a way that Gunrunner might not have had pressure put on him. And I think that it's definitely an interesting piece to the puzzle.
Definitely. Give us a little more. I mean, do you think he is going to actively compromise Gunrunner's chances?
Well, I think it depends on where they draw, right? If Sharp Azteca draws inside of Gunrunner, Florent has an option after doing what they did in the Breeders' Cup, setting what most would argue were pretty quick fractions, going 1.25 miles. You would think that there's not really. It's going to be hard to get Gunrunner out of his comfort zone if he can do that, going 1.25 miles against those types of horses. going a mile and an eighth, getting pressed along a little bit more. It doesn't seem like something that's going to break him by any means. However, he is going to get engaged sooner than he normally does, and he's going to be engaged by a horse that's better at that kind of game than one might think. And so I think that he will be. I think that if I owned a gun runner, or if I trained gun runner, I would prefer Sharp Azteca not be in the race. So
I agree with that.
I think you have to say that at least that. I don't know about if he's going to be compromised by any means. If I owned a closer, I would appreciate the fact that Sharp Azteca was in the race. So I think from all angles, it's his involvement will affect the outcome of the race.
Makes sense to me. And it's interesting to see, just looking at prices on an odds checker for the Pegasus World Cup right now. Gunrunner was 4-5 before that news, 5-6 after. So still an odds-on shot, whereas in my gut, he feels like more of an even money shot after that news breaks. Am I overreacting, or do you feel like that's about right?
No, I think that's right. I mean, obviously, we said the draw is going to make a huge difference. And the other thing to think about with Sharp Azteca is that he successfully rated in the Cigar Mile, and I think that people like me who thought that his best attribute was going fast, he kind of showed a different dimension in this spot. Now, what I would do with him is just try to run them off their feet. I don't think I want to sit off of Gun Runner and try to pass him.
Yeah, that's very different than the trick he pulled in the Cigar Mile when it's Gun Runner there.
I don't think I want to do that, but from a figure standpoint, he can compete. He can absolutely compete. There's a question, obviously, about the mile and an eighth, and so there's a lot to be said about that. But it's also taking place in Jorge Navarro's playground and backyard of South Florida, where he does so well. So I don't know. I could see myself taking a flyer with a horse like that.
10-1 right now on odds checker. Doesn't sound horrible. How does that sound to you?
I think he'll be. I think he'll be 5-1 on the day, won't he?
Yeah, half or a third. That even is what I'm just sort of in my gut feeling right now. I think a lot will depend not only on the draw, but on how the track is playing too. You got to remember, this Gulfstream track can be, on a big day, it's been known to be a no passing zone, and that could play into things as well, of course. So it's going to be a lot of fun, a lot to pay attention to. I'm very interested in it. I'm not going to be able to get down there, as it turns out. I was trying to get down to the Pegasus. I was interested to check out this new contest. We should pause on that for a minute, but I've got some family obligations, and I don't know. I've just been, after being sick for a week to start the year, the idea of not traveling in January is really appealing to me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I'm from the guy who's taken off 115 times in the last 365 days, but yeah, I'm with you. It's a lot of going back and forth.
You'll be going though?
Yes, I'm going. In fact, it's our first. That Thursday is our first wagering committee meeting for the Breeders' Cup.
Oh, right, the Breeders' Cup wagering committee. For folks who missed that story, JK, one of the players, tapped to help. I guess it's not just it was something that was happening even before there was an issue at this year's Breeders' Cup betting challenge. So I guess it's a more general wager consulting. But I'd have to think JK, tops on your agenda is going to be looking at the rules for the Breeders' Cup betting challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like I said, I've told people, just for the record, this was a conversation that happened before the Breeders' Cup. It was, I got reached out to about it before that, so it was going to happen anyways. However, I do believe that the top of the agenda is addressing the issues that happened in the Breeders' Cup this year, moving forward with new rules and new angles for preventing some of the funny business, and then also just growing the tournament and making it a better experience for the player, and also generating handle. It's what it was brought into effect for. It's what Ken Kirkner and team first saw an opportunity with. It was an opportunity to drive handle and increase the wagering dollars pushed through the window, and so we'll find a way to maintain that integrity, but also keep the integrity of it being fair for all the players.
Yeah, I think that's last thing you said has to be the first thing in a big way. I think everything takes care of itself if you can sort out, some of the stuff on the integrity and just fairness. It's beyond just integrity. It's just the essential fairness of the rules and making sure everybody's on the same platform. Now, contests, live bankroll contest, exciting live bankroll contest. Let's talk about this Pegasus World Cup betting challenge. $12,000. It's a big buy-in event. We've been running qualifiers on DRF tournaments. They proved very popular. We've got a last chance qualifier coming on January 15th with feeders every day. Great ratios in these feeders. 1 in 5 for a $50 level that gets you to the $220 level where it's 1 in 5 once again. That gets you to that grade 1 qualifier where you win indirectly. You can also buy in directly for $960 into the grade 1 and win your Pegasus seat. Other news from the Pegasus Challenge that was just released this week. Originally, it had been stated that if you were playing via simulcast, via express bet, you'd have to pay a $1,000 supplemental fee. That is now being waived for players buying 2 entries. Fascinating idea. $12,000, no entry fee. You get to bet that entire amount of money. The prize money is added. Good opportunity here, JK. Do you see yourself taking part?
Yeah, I think that I'll take a look at it when I get down and see the card and see the event that, and I'm not married to the idea of playing in it though. I mean, it is a lot of money. That's $12,000, and I usually play to win. So there's a high probability that if things don't go well, I'll leave with nothing, and that's a big nothing to leave with. So, it's definitely a great opportunity. It's very interesting what Stronach is kind of willing to do in terms of making it more player friendly from a takeout standpoint. And when I say takeout, I mean takeout in the contest for the prize pool. So kudos to them for doing that. And I think it's interesting for sure. But I'm not 100. It's a big. It's
a chunk of change. It's a chunk of change. It's not accurate to say that it's a no takeout contest because, of course, every dollar one churns of that $12,000 bankroll, there's money taken out of. But it is correct to say that it is money-added prize pool, which is something in the early days of the Breeders' Cup, they did it to a small degree, but never has an entire prize pool been funded by outside sources. That's what's really interesting and the kind of thing that I could see might get some professional gamblers interested who don't even usually play in contests because it really is a great opportunity. It's the kind of thing that players, from the time I wrote The Winning Contest Player, have dreamed about more or less, is the idea of, hey, what if somebody else could put up the prize pool we're competing for and our contribution is just churning this money in the contest? It's a smart idea and it's one that could have a future. So excited to see what happens down there at the Pegasus. Let's segue, JK, and talk about a little bit of the racing from last weekend. 2 performances that are garnering a lot of attention. Let's start with one that I'm guessing you maybe even saw in person in the Mucho Macho Man.
I did. I was fortunate enough to step out on the balcony and watch watch Mask win easy, and it was live and it was from a great vantage point. Nice horse, nice figure. What was the buyer? I didn't.
The buyer came back at 88, I believe. Okay. I think he's had. No, excuse me, 91 on buyer. The first race was an 88. So this horse now to start the career, that's a nice little progression. 88 and 91, and not just 91, but 91 wrapped up on Craig's numbers, Timeform US. The final figure was a 116, downgraded to a 112 performance figure, presumably because the fractions in the race were coded blue for both 4, 6, and 7 furlongs. So not the kind of way that you're going to earn a higher Timeform US figure, the way they're corrected to upgrade horses who contested hot early paces. But I mean, it was an imperious victory. I mean,
yeah, and he ran away and made a horse that was garnering some attention and has some accolades already for his performances as a 2-year-old. And Dak Attack, who came into the race in high praise from the DRF Clocker report with an A- workout, which is not something we toss around very often. So the way that Mask kind of put that horse away, says a lot about that performance. And how about Chad Brown, the turf trainer, with probably the 2 leading, or at least 2 of the top 5 2-year-old or 3-year-olds going into the Derby prep races.
The other one you're referring to being Montauk? Is that him?
No, I was
no Good
Montauk
Magic.
Good Magic. Yeah.
Who trains Montauk?
That's Todd.
Okay, sorry. I'm not over the flu yet. Remember last week the flu had me thinking Lady Eli won the Breeders' Cup, and now I'm forgetting who trains leading Derby contenders. We're not Derby list guys. It's not. I just think that's like too academic of an exercise. At some point, we will put together a team again. We'll put together a contest and have a team. God help us. Let's hope there's not another Kinchin Slam in the works. But of course, it's always fun to talk about these Triple Crown races. Let's stick with Mask for another minute. One reason why I'm so impressed by the horse, despite being on the engine, slow pace, I thought the first race was impressive too. I mean, the break was not good, obviously. It was definitely a poor break. The trip kind of worked out, settling in behind a two-horse duel after that. But I just liked the way the horse finished. I liked the fact that figure was an 88. I like the fact that two horses in that race came back to win. Granted, not exactly figures that, not exactly times that broke any watches. The horses who he beat in the maiden, but still, there's a lot of impressive things here. The ability to pass horses is nice, and just the extreme talent on display. You got to think from this barn, there's going to be more to come with Mask.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was his first time going not 2 turns, but going a mile. Obviously, the mile down at Gulfstream is 1 turn, but no, I think that he's definitely one that you would want to keep an eye on. And it's interesting to hear. I don't know if Chad has said yet what he's going to do. I would imagine he'll keep this one in Good Magic separated. And so I would think maybe Mask would be the one that would head back up north to Aqueduct to kind of take care of the business in those prep races. That's my uneducated guess on where I would do with him.
You made a mention before of the Clocker report on Dak Attack. Was there a Clocker report on Mask coming in, or was it a Palmetto situation?
Yeah, no, he was there. I think it was like B plus B-ish. It was good. It wasn't if you were a Mask believer, that was all you needed to see. But like we've talked about before, those A-minuses really stick out when you're looking at the workout report.
For sure. I didn't see much of an excuse for Dak Attack. Not the easiest trip early, sort of stuck in between horses, but just no match and no, nothing I'd call an excuse.
No, like you said, it was a slow pace. He was a little bit further back than I would imagine that they would have wanted him to be. But I don't care where he was. I don't think he was beating anyone. Let's
move out west, JK, and talk about the Grade 3 Sham. Blinkers off for McKenzie. Oh, I texted you a question. I don't know if I saw the answer to it or if you got a chance to answer to it. I was just trying to remember again what we thought happened at the end of the day in the Los Alamitos Futurity with McKenzie. I was sort of remembering the race 2 different ways.
Yeah, I just think that he was kind of green and kind of tired. He was wide all the way around there, and that's where you want to be. However, it's still not an ideal trip in all situations. I thought he ran well there. I think he just got beat by a better horse to the wire in Solomini. Yeah. And, he had this field over a barrel, and wasn't much to it to me.
Gotcha. There was something I didn't like. Same exact race shape as the race in Florida, first of all. Coded blue on Timeform US to 4, 6, and 7. Though a little more notably, I guess, in this case, McKenzie didn't cut out the fractions. But the reason I asked about the Los Al race is I felt when I was looking back, I was like, am I being too harsh? I remembered him being a little wobbly and like green, kind of like you said. But then I was like, was I so focused on the DQ that I thought shouldn't have been? Was there enough rough stuff in the stretch to maybe forgive that? And then here, I don't know about you, but I don't like that flag tail swishing stuff he did running through the lane. I mean, maybe I'm picking nits here at a horse who's ran a 97 buyer speed figure and had a 92 and a 99 before that. But, it just made me question maybe a little bit how genuine he is. Am I too harsh?
Well, I think it could mean a couple of things. I mean, it could, I think that it could mean discomfort. It could mean, bored. What are we doing here? What's going on? Or can I run a little faster, please? Why why are we slowing down? It can mean a lot of things. It's definitely something that I saw and noticed, but we'll keep an eye on it and see what he does how he progresses moving forward. Pedigree suggests he'll be fine. He's out of street sense and Derby winner. So we'll have to see. I thought he did it well. He didn't do it where I'm like running to the window just to bet him now. But
yeah, 122 for Craig, which is pretty strong. That was downgraded because of being close-ish to the early pace to a 119. But that's comparably a little bit faster than that 97 buyer. Does it bother you at all that a horse like this has yet to run a figure on the buyer scale faster than his debut figure of 99?
No, it doesn't. I mean,
you sound pained answering that.
Well, I mean, he ran at Los Al, which can be a tricky place to run, and then he was kind of geared down to a sense in the sham. So maybe the next one, if the next one stays kind of low or doesn't progress the next prep, then I might be concerned. But no, it doesn't. It doesn't really bother me, and it's still pretty close. He's still in the same general vicinity.
I don't know who's going to show up against him, and it could be foolish to take him on, obviously, depending on the answer to that question. But my inclination is to be scared of Mask and not be in any hurry to oppose him. But McKenzie, I'm kind of ready to take a shot against. Just my own gut based on the two performances going forward. A little bit of buy, sell, hold action right now. If you had to choose between McKenzie at 25 and Mask at 20, both the best prices on Odds Checker, which one of those would you pick, and does either one get your motor running?
Probably Mask. It feels like there's more upside there. I mean, like you said, we've kind of seen McKenzie run 3 times. We kind of know where he is. We've probably have more questions of negativity about McKenzie. You know, the race where he got wobbly and got put up, and then the tail swishing and the buyer question. He's not really getting back to that first. Those are the questions. They're not indictments to me, but they're questions. I don't have that many questions about Mask, so you can keep the 5 points on that line, and I'll take Mask at 20-1.
What do you think about Bolt Doro as the season moves forward? He had a little training setback. What they say, it was a hamstring?
Yeah, I guess something like that. I don't know if it was a hamstring or maybe I just made that up. I think I said that like in a joke, but he did. Pulled muscle. Pulled muscle. But you know what I've learned about hamstrings and my coaching career and just in general, like fast people pull hamstrings. Do horses have hamstrings?
I don't think they do.
They should. If they don't. Joke. Yeah, they should. They should have hamstrings if they don't. What are
you hearing? What are you thinking about this horse?
It's not encouraging. We've talked about this before, and it's. I don't doubt that Mick Ruiz is a good horseman or a good trainer or a talented trainer or anything like that. It's just a question with that horse is a guy who does not have as many skins on the wall and hasn't been through this situation with a great horse as many times as a guy like Chad, Todd, Bob, Zito, Mandela, the list goes on. So when things like this start happening, hiccups start happening along the way, it does take a little bit of confidence away regardless of the equine athlete. And so it's not encouraging, and I wouldn't be cutting in line to bet any futures on Bolt Doro despite his talent that he's shown and some of the promise that he showed in his 2-year-old year.
I think that's fair. And again, we said it with that slow break at the juvenile seemed like it could be indicative of problems to come. Maybe those are manifesting, maybe not. Maybe everything will turn around. We'll have plenty of time to see evidence on the track, but I was getting a little bit of a like Texas Red vibe. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I do know exactly what you mean.
Not that he won, not that Bolt Doro won the juvenile, but Texas Red, big impressive juvenile winner, and then setbacks. We saw a couple of flashes of brilliance later on, but too much too much weird stuff going on to be a contender on the Triple Crown Trail. We'll see, though. I mean, I'd love to be wrong. Horse has amazing talent and one of the leading contenders for 2-year-old, though I'm thinking Good Magic will take it at the end of the day. Have you had any further thoughts on that little head-to-head? Talk to anybody else about that one?
No, I would think that Good Magic will win. However, I won't be surprised if Boldoro wins. But I think Good Magic will.
All right, let's move on to the Avatar story, JK. Lots of people confused. What bet did JK lose now that he has a Twitter egg for the Avatar? Pete, how'd you take advantage of him this time? These are just some of the questions I've received. I got to be honest, I had nothing to do with it. Tell the story.
Yeah, I gave out a pick 3 for out of the gate, and I singled McKenzie, and then I singled a Bob Hess horse that was shipping down from Golden Gate, and it was a horse that was dropping from a protected maiden special weight at Golden Gate in for a tag at Santa Anita, and the horse, it was a 50 claimer that Mike Smith was getting on, and I thought to myself, well, that's a pretty strong move by Mike and his agent and Bob Hess of kind of getting that team together. This horse might be on to something. Showed some speed on the Poly, going 5.5. Was now going to be running 6. I thought the horse was super live, and even got some positive, scoop on the horse that the connections were happy about the horse's chances. And then they break, and the horse doesn't get the lead, and then the horse is 3 wide, and then they come off the turn, and the horse is getting out as if and I've never sat on a horse except for once, and I was in Puerto Vallarta. On the beach.
I've seen the photographic evidence, folks. It's not
yes. It looks like a winner's circle picture, so don't. I think Barbara Livingston was actually there. She's the one who took the photo. I want to make sure we give her photo credit. But anyways, at no point did Mike even like almost extend his left hand with the rein to try to bring the horse back into a path that most horses follow coming off of a turn. And we talk about our path work we do for bias stuff. And the head on, the horse finished the race in the 13 path. And at no point did Mike ever really try to correct the horse. Now, like I said, I've never sat on a horse before. Mike's forgot more about riding horses than I will ever learn in my life. But I was a little flustered by it. And I'm going blank on the other time recently that Mike let me down. Oh, on Collected, he let me down. I'm not really sure why he wasn't on the lead there. So I had enough, and I felt like he needed profile pick probation.
So you removed Mike Smith from your avatar.
Profile pick probation, or you can call it profile pick purgatory. Maybe we'll do a Twitter contest to see which one we like better. So I took him off and replaced it with the egg, and and soon enough I'll forgive him and put him back in there. But I needed to take a stand. So
why the egg?
Oh, I just thought it would be. I just thought it'd be funnier than some random picture of me doing something else. I just figured I'd really get my point across by putting the egg up.
What I like, that's true. And what I like about it also is putting up the egg sort of holds you responsible too. You're not doing just that you sort of garden variety jockey bashing. Oh, he did this, he did this. You're also sort of holding yourself accountable by putting something silly there.
Yeah, I missed the third leg anyway, so I deserve some punishment as well.
Didn't you go 6 deep, you said?
Yeah, I try to get cute. I try to beat it in the post thinking that he wants to go longer. And just too classy for those, and got it done anyway. So I deserve a little punishment as well. But I forgive you, Mike, and I'll let you back in to the good graces here in due time.
I'm sure he's almost as relieved to hear that, JK, as you would be if Christian Helmer started speaking to you again.
Oh, the Mad Hatter. Oh, jeez.
Less said about him, the better, but I had to get that out there. Speaking of emojis, we've had a lot of questions about the nut emoji that you sported for a few weeks after the Breeders' Cup. The general gist of the question, JK, and I'll let you answer it in your own words. What was up with the nut emojis?
Yeah, our friend Matt Bernier texts me before the Haskell, I believe, and said, "Am I nuts that I like Gervin?" And I simply responded with the peanut emoji. And then Gervin went on to win that race and pay well. I think he was like 6-7-1 or whatever. And so it's just become a running joke. And then we followed it up, right? Didn't we follow it up with the contest? The loser had to, the worst, the person who did the worst had to use the nut emoji.
Yeah, that was what it was, basically, to just say that the person. So the indication is that you were the nut.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sure there's some people in this world that can come up with some other creative ways to use the peanut emoji and other underlying meanings. I think it's a very dynamic emoji that you can have some fun with. So you make sure it's in your recently selected, your top emojis. It's one that's definitely useful. I use that one quite a bit. There's obviously the famous eggplant one, and there's a lot of different ones you can use to get a lot of different points across.
Geez, Lee, now he's talking about the eggplant emoji. I vowed, after we offended some nice people on Twitter the other day when one of our listeners accidentally made us take a blue turn, we're saving our blue material for the dungeon. We will continue to do periscopes after dark in the dungeon where it's no holds barred, make Howard Stern sound like a preacher kind of situations. We will do that in the dungeon, but we keep it clean here on the show, JK.
What are you talking about? I like eggplant parmesan. What's the problem?
Fair enough. Let's talk about Timeform US a little bit more, Jonathan, because we had some interesting questions with the new, they're not new pace figures, they're newly added to the DRFPPs, and we had some valid questions about them. Well, some valid and some a little strange, but that I thought were worth pausing on. We had one person point out an instance to us, and I don't have it in front of me, but they said, this must be a mistake. Here's a race at Gulfstream Park that was, the first quarter was 27.70, and the previous race was at Gulfstream Park West, and it was 27.79, and the race at Calder, Gulfstream West, was listed as 125, and the race at Gulfstream was listed as a 75. This must be a mistake, right? How could the pace figures be so different? Can you explain?
Well, I think, just to help you out a little bit, I think people that are listening to the show are like, damn, are we talking about harness racing? Because you said 27 for the opening quarter, 27.7, and what you meant was 23.7.
22, I think, but 22.7 and 22.79.
Yeah, we were at Northfield Park. And
what's wrong with harness? What's wrong with a little harness every now and then?
Yeah, so the question is...
Got to get my jug heads on, JK.
Absolutely. It reminds me, our show Billions is coming back soon. I don't know if you saw that. I retweeted the trailer. Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
Exciting. So the idea is that, the people ask the question, which is what Buyer on Speed and what speed figures were even created for, was that 24 seconds or 1 minute at one track is not the same as 24 seconds or 1 minute at another track. Basic principle of racing and why speed figures were valuable and what Buyer did and created was so brilliant. So when you see an early fraction at Gulfstream Park West that was 23.7 whatever, and you see a fraction at Gulfstream Park, 23.7, it does not mean they're the same thing. And Craig's pace figures made that suggestion. He suggested that early fraction was worth a 125 at Gulfstream Park West and a 70 whatever you said at Gulfstream Park. Keep in mind, there's a lot of different variables. Our friend Craig Milkowski wrote a big write-up, actually, I read before the show about the run-up.
I was going to get to that next.
And so I think that it's not an exact science in that regard. I'm not sure how it is at Gulfstream Park West or at Gulfstream when it comes to the dirt racing and sprint races. But the other thing to keep in mind is that day at Gulfstream Park West, where that 125 was awarded for that 23.7 opening quarter mile, was that it was on an off track. It was good. I think it was listed as good. So there was an abnormal amount of moisture. It had either rained or it didn't rain. And so the idea that the same physical clocking at two different racetracks would provide a different pace figure, to me, makes complete sense. And Yeah, I would find it more bizarre if both of those if they both had the same, the same figure given. I'd be like, really? It's the same exact figure for two different racetracks, two different surfaces. So that's the long answer about the Red Mile and the harness racing that happened that we were talking about.
There was a very good question asked by a couple of different people about, and this is very important to understand when you're looking at those figures, particularly the Timeform US pace lines that are now in the Formulator PPs. They are not traditional pace figures where you can use them looking at one horse's pace line versus another horse in the same race to try to determine who's going to be faster today. That is not the use of them. You used the perfect phrase the other day when we were talking about it. Do you remember what you said? They're not really pace figures. They're more...
I don't know, but I like it when you tell me I do things that are perfect. Keep going.
It was good. You said they're not really pace figures as much as they're race shape figures. And what the Timeform lines do is help you evaluate that final time and how it was earned. This, as we talk about, is one of the main reasons we use pace figures to help us provide upgrades and downgrades of what the final figure ends up being. That is what the Timeform US pace figures are good for. If you're looking to compare two horses in this race and decide who's going to get the lead, the tool the Timeform US has for that, that's also in Formulator, is that little, in the PP, it appears, I think, right under the horse's name up there on the left. It's that little snapshot view. I think it's called the preview view on Timeform US, where it'll have a single rating for early speed and late speed. That's sort of a composite rating based on the horse's last, whatever it is, 5 races. And then that scale is corrected to all the horses in the race today. So when you see on the preview screen that horse with a 117, Timeform US is suggesting that it's a lot more likely that horse is going to be on the lead than the horse with the 100. But if you look in those two horses' individual PPs, you're going to see a different type of array of numbers, because Craig's methodology isn't trying to do what a traditional pace figure does. I'm going to make Craig listen to this and confirm that everything I said was right, but I'm pretty sure that's it. It's a really important thing, because even very seasoned and sophisticated handicappers have been asking me about this, and I think those figures are powerful. I love the Timeform figures, but I don't want people using a wrench to try to hammer in the picture hanger in the wall. You got to use the right tool for the right job when it comes to this handicapping information.
Right. But just for one other point, I have successfully hung up a poster using a wrench.
You can do it. It's just a lot harder.
Yeah. Right. And the new integration of Timeform with the classic PPs and Formulator, right under the jockey's name is that same number that Pete's talking about. If you're not popping open the Timeform US and not seeing the pace projector, which I recommend that you do, unless you're playing in a contest with me, then I don't care what you do. That number is there. It's available for you to see in your DRF PPs right under the jockey that's writing today's name.
Perfect. Good stuff. Any other thoughts on that before we move on to a discussion of this piece that Craig just put up on the Timeform US blog?
No, let's move on.
I don't know if you had a chance to read it thoroughly, but it's called About Time for a Change at Gulfstream Park. And Craig has been at the cutting edge of pointing out some of the data inaccuracies. And I know this is an area that gets Mike Maloney's goat too. We have this gambling game. We've got tens of millions of dollars being bet, and we can't count on our information being accurate. And there's some systematic problems that keep cropping up, specifically at Gulfstream Park with these 7.5 furlong races that they really should be unacceptable to all horse players in the modern age, where you're putting out information that there's not really a full attempt made at it being accurate. Rather than rehash the whole article, I'm just going to suggest that folks go to timeformusblog.com. It'll be the latest entry on there. But I mean, this is important. It might seem like pretty arcane to a casual fan, but trust me, having accurate data is essential to the growth of handle, to the growth of our sport.
Yeah, well, of course, but it also can lead to some really misleading opportunities. I mean, these are nothing that I would sign my name to. I haven't done the research, but essentially, you get a buyer figure on a 7.5 turf race at Gulfstream that says it's a 59, and then he's in a race with a bunch of horses that are getting 72s. But really, that 59 should have been higher because of the timing error or the timing inaccuracy. And now you've tossed that horse, and he's the one that knocks you out of your pick six. I mean, it's a significant thing that needs to be addressed. And I think it kind of it transitions, for the sake of not paraphrasing Craig's writing. I think we should, like you said, direct people there because it's kind of deep. We can always analyze it. But I think it kind of rolls us into a bigger issue that we have in this sport, which is our information. Like the idea that one entity controls all of our information, that information is not held to a higher standard of accuracy, and the information is not free. Our friend Marshall Graham, who I talked about earlier, like I saw him in a Twitter conversation mentioning that if he wanted to run a in-depth analysis of baseball, all of those stats are free and available. However, it's not the case in racing. People joke about the Equibase site all the time about how there's all the caption, and if you look up 4 races and they start to shut you down and make it whatever. And I know that I tried to do a Trackus situation where I wanted to get some Trackus information in a downloadable form, and it was like I knew someone at Trackus, and it was still tough to try to get it done, and it never happened. And we want people to have confidence in the information that they have and to place wagers. However, we make it an obstacle for them to get that information. And on the opposite end of that, if you're looking for an example of how it should be done, then you can look at Hong Kong and the Hong Kong Jockey Club and what they do. They provide everything you could imagine. Workout videos for every horse. Their vet records for the day and leading up, and all the information that you want. And I get it, but I don't get why information is such a quagmire in our game. And it's a little bit frustrating and disheartening,
to say the least. If you could take a competitive pricing model with other gambling games and you could free the data to allow other types of app development and computer basically modeling of the data, the growth to handle would be explosive. Now, I say these things like they're easy, and they're not at all. But if folks want to try to envision a future where racing really regains some of its place in the sporting landscape, a sporting landscape that's about to change dramatically once again, and racing has the sort of potential to try to go along for the ride as a potentially superior gambling game to sports, or it has the potential to get left in the dust. And,
I'd love to see someone actively pursue. I know that we have a lot of torch carriers in our sport that want to point out inefficiencies and unfair situations, and people want to complain about the years that writings were released and were they award worthy. People want to complain about the winners of tournaments. People want to complain about
that was you.
I know, takeout. They want to complain about all these things, but I've never really seen anyone probe into the information situation. Like, how much does the entity that holds that information, how much do they make? And why are they protecting it so? And which different models could we create that can make that information more available and free to new and current users? And so I really don't know. I'm sure there's something about it. I've just never seen it. I mean, you can Google right now 1,500 charts about takeout. I wonder what that looks like.
The data situation, it's worth talking about. Marshall would probably be a good person to speak with about it. I have some theories, but rather than go on extemporaneously, I'd rather talk to somebody like him, have him as a guest on the show at some point, and talk about that sort of hidden economic side of the game that could really lead to some growth, I believe. I have another listener question I want to get to, JK. We got about 4.5 minutes left. This one was about trip handicapping. And the question was, what do you look for during trip handicapping? Are you watching your wagering interest? Are you looking for any horse with trouble?
Yeah, like we talked about when Mike was on a few weeks ago, and I compared it to a story of when I used to coach. Is you have to get better at not watching the play and not watching your bet. You have to do better at watching the big picture and understanding the big picture if you want to make sure you take as much as you can away from it. I'm looking for things that people aren't seeing. I'm looking for visual things that stand out to me in terms of like hidden trouble, hidden checking, the head-on view with a horse that maybe is taking a lot of kickback and isn't liking it, a horse that maybe got bumped at the start that you couldn't tell from the pan, kind of finding those extra steps in finding that kind of winning move, and I really do compare it to film study in football. I saw a thing recently where Belichick, and it was probably more Josh McDaniels than it was Belichick, because he's the one who calls the offensive plays, but them really just taking advantage of this one tendency that a safety had. And it was like the feet alignment. And we did that too, is if your feet are if your right foot is back on a corner, then sometimes they're playing this coverage, and little things you can find. And I think that's what you're trying to find in racing, is those subtleties that not everyone else sees. Because if everyone else sees it, then everyone else bets it, and then you have no edge there. So you have to try to find those little things. Mike's book is a great starting point at finding some subtleties that you can identify that I think other people aren't looking at. But that's the broad answer, is finding the subtleties within the trip, not the jockey who checks and stands up and the whole world knows about it. And I always screw this up with the universal, what is it? What do we call it, Pete? The
international bad trip horse?
International bad trip horse. I always screw that up. But yeah, that does you no good. Everyone sees that. The chart caller catches it, and it's in the form. It's the other things that I think are the ones you want to find.
The Maloney book, I mean, obviously I was going to do this, going to do the plug here, gives a great breakdown of every stage of the race and what he's looking for. And he specifically addresses that issue of watching your bet and says that the fun of watching your wagering interest is one of the things that you give up when you become a really serious horse player, because you need to be watching everything else. He's actually doing the trips for the races as he watches them. And he goes through step by step in betting with an edge for exactly how that's done, what he's looking for at the break, coming into the turn, coming out of the turn, all the way through the wire and even past the wire in terms of the gallop out. One other piece of advice I'd give is, Mike talks in the book about how valuable the time is after scratches and before the first race starts, when you have that last bit of information and can really focus. I think another bit of hidden, really important time is in a race, especially if you're watching at home in a DVR situation, or a situation where you can rewind and watch things again right away. Right when the horses hit the wire, you've got see what you want to see on the gallop out, and then you've got time before the next relevant thing happens. I've seen trip handicappers. I remember visiting Maury Wolf, God, it must have been 10 years ago now, during the Keeneland meet. And as soon as they hit the wire and he saw what he needed to see on the gallop out, he was rewinding his TiVo and starting in on doing the trips for every horse in a race and making sure he catches things. But tons more on that on Betting with an Edge. I still have autographed copies available. If you're interested, hit me up at Looms Boldly on Twitter or podcast@drf.com. Do you have something quick? Because I have something I want to do to close out. If not, JK.
Yeah, I wanted to say thanks to one of our listeners who was in town. Marshall Sterling is a meteorologist and was in town in Austin for a weather conference, and so he came out last night. We grabbed a couple adult beverages, and it was fun talking to him about weather. And he actually, funny enough, maybe not funny enough was the right way to say it, but he pretty much his focus is on forests and forest fires, and part of his job is evaluating why and how they happened, and they usually come across his desk about a year after, and he expects at some point that he'll probably be involved in kind of determining what happened at San Luis. Wow. And so it was definitely interesting talking to him, and he's a really nice guy, excited about the sport, and so it was fun catching up with him last night. And I know that we've shared this sentiment before, but it's always fun catching up with the people that take the time to listen to us blab for an hour Tuesdays and Fridays.
I like it. I just wanted to end off on a sad note. It has been a rough few weeks, JK, as you know, the racing world having lost a pair of legends in the form of Jack Van Berg, of course, amazing piece about his memorial service on DRF.com right now from Mary Rampolini. I suggest everybody check out. Also, the Racing World losing Eddie Gaudet. Our condolences to the families involved, and also a special shout out to our friend John Nichols, whose mom passed away over the course of the last few weeks. This is the worst stuff in life, and we want our friends to know that our thoughts and prayers are with them. And I just wanted to get that note in there in tribute to these terrible losses over the past few weeks. That's it for this show. Thank you so much, JK. As always, thanks to all of you for listening. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. We will be back on Friday with show number 300. May you win all your photos.